Here are the game rules. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves. Then Reginald and I will pose questions. The questions were submitted in advance by our partners, and some questions may come from the audience. After we read the question, each candidate will have 2.5 minutes to respond. We'll let the candidate know that their time is up by simply saying thank you. If you're watching our live stream on YouTube tonight, you can submit your questions in the chat.
If you can keep in mind that this is being interpreted simultaneously through ASL and Spanish, so just keep that in mind when answering each question. So now for another question from community partners, what is your view on the role of police in the community? How do you plan to address concerns regarding systemic racism in law enforcement and over-targeting of people of color? What's your position on school resource officers with public schools?
I have gone on record saying that I am not in favor of school resource officers in our public schools. The data there does show also, again, that there's systemic racism. According to Education World, while Black students made up 16% of U.S. public school enrollment during the 2011-2012 school year, they represented 27% of those referred to law enforcement by schools and 31% of those who were subject to school-related arrests, sort of a school-to-prison pipeline, as we've heard other people talk about. Not in favor of defunding the police. I am in favor of addressing systemic racism, and I would rather see us spend money on school counselors who actually counsel and don't just do scheduling and teaching assistants.
We know that the police do not often have the training in mental health situations or crises, and we have seen the impact in our communities. We also need to recognize the harm caused by the police. Several things that I would like to be able to see is making sure that police need to recognize and to apologize for any racist behavior, ensuring that there's police accountability.
And they need to get out of their patrol cars so they can meet people in the community so they're working together for the same goal. There needs to be a way to file a grievance. And I also think that law enforcement could stand a little expansion of the diversity, not only from people of color, but also women too.
One thing that where it needs to start is equal treatment of people, such as one of the position statements of the NAACP is law enforcement accountability and body cameras. Now, to me, body cameras are a very astute step forward in this matter. It protects both the police and the citizen. We can see exactly what's going on. We can use that information to weed out the bad, or don't say bad, officers in line. And by the same token, support the good ones.
But they have failed to back up the usefulness of that technology and the power of that technology with policy that actually holds them accountable. If people are not allowed to review the footage, or at least a third-party unbiased accountability board of some type, then there's basically no point.
It's no longer just enough to be not racist. We need to be actively anti-racist. So when you see racism, say something. That's not okay. You know, when you see white supremacists, you know, educate them. You know, we don't need to meet them with violence, but we need to let them know that their actions are not okay.
Many immigrants are the backbone of our communities as essential workers, including farm workers who have continued to work during the pandemic and during wildfires. What would you do to provide assistance to immigrant Oregonians and businesses owned by people of color during and after the pandemic? Would you support additional funding to help undocumented workers and their families?
One thing that I've been kind of vocal about is the idea of starting a BIPOC chamber, you know, because the existing chambers right now do not represent people of color in the community. One example of that was during COVID, there was a local chamber that ended up getting tasked with reaching out to businesses to let them know that COVID relief was there. And that didn't happen. A lot of Latino businesses did not apply for the grant and that funding. So second round came around. I was working with the city to be able to get that information out there. And as I walked into businesses in Keizer, because I have family members and I walked into my aunt's salon and she says, no, I've never heard of that. Nobody's ever came to me and talked to me about those types of resources.
As a state, we need to do better and making sure that not just multilingual languages are being distributed so that people know that there's resources, but we also need to look at indigenous languages. That is something that we need to recognize to be more inclusive of our populations that live in our state.
What have you done, or what would you do to ensure that disenfranchised parts of the community are registered to vote? How would you ensure that voters whose first language is not English feel like part of the voting process? Bill, it's all yours.
Because we've done everything we could with automatic voter registration. We've increased the number of registered voters from 66% to over 90% now. And so I think we're getting the ballot into the hands of most everybody.
We have to do better in making sure that multiple languages are available in our voters' pamphlets, in our information on how to run for office. I know that's something I struggled with, is just getting information on how to run for office. There's so many things that we can do to improve that.
Okay, for any rebroadcast of these forums, please check with our media partners, KMU's Community Radio and KTUP Radio Poder. You can also watch recording of this forum at the same link on YouTube. And again, we thank our partners with a special nod to CC Media for making this happen. We thank Grant Bachman, Wendy Brokaw, Tim Marchuka, and all of the production team, because this is always a feat. And thank you guys. Have a great night.